right. Oh ho 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 ho! Righty then. Hello. Once more. Wow. There was some crazy, I don't know. How many hours is 34 years? Yeah. Well, it feels like it just happened like this. But while it's happening, you have the feeling it's never gonna end. And suddenly it's all over. Right? And that's the problem, you know. People these days, they're kind of obsessive about death, right? I mean, everything for them is about dying. Oh my god, I'm gonna die someday. Oh no, my neighbor died. Yeah, and then you go to a funeral where the prerequisite for funerals is that you bring a lot of sadness. Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. You have to bring a lot of sadness, and if you don't, people are gonna say you have no emotions. Yeah, and your emotions are just an act. Because after the funeral's over, you go home and watch TV. I mean, what's a better statement of you have no emotions than to go home after a funeral and to watch TV? And then stuff yourself with food. Yeah, that's the kind of people we're dealing with these days. And I said after my last funeral, which is some time ago, I'll never go to a funeral again. Because it's a lie. Right? If you go there, they expect you to be a certain way. You know, they expect you to be sad, they expect you to dress black, to cry, and if you don't do that, they come and say, you have no feelings! Well, that's a very mean thing to say to somebody. Just because I don't show you my sadness, because maybe my sadness wells up in me, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of sadness inside of me, but I have learned to transform it into a smile, right? And so sometimes when I was in a situation with another person, and that person would cry, right? You know, cry about never seeing each other again. Then I would smile, because I really liked that they were expressing their emotions in such a way, and then, you know, they were getting angry at me. Why are you smiling? Well, the problem was, I always thought it was something bad that I was smiling. And what I could have said was, you know, I really love you. You know, I love it that you show your emotions like this. And it's nice to see you. To see you, right? All flustery, like, you know, It doesn't really matter, you know, that's how you are. But if I would go to a funeral these days, and I would pretend that I'm sad, but sometimes, right, people die, and I actually think, well, good. Because, you know, they were in a really bad state. I mean, why do you cry about somebody that died after having had 4 years of cancer? Or that was just sitting home, or, you know, or in a retiring room, or home and doing nothing anymore. Why would I be sad for somebody like this to die? You know, I would rejoice and say, oh my, you know, finally he let go. Finally she let go, or was able to let go. Because all this constant clinging and stuff. So I think it's important to be a little bit obsessed with life. To be a little bit obsessed with living, right? Having a feeling, but now, you know, that's basically the summary of an adrenaline junkie, right? If somebody's really obsessed with life and getting the most out of it and this rush all the time, that's usually the people that go doing base jumps and that, you know, drive their car at high speeds. You know, they really want to get it all, and probably, you know, they're kind of chasing their own death. You know, I think there's like the middle path as usual. which is, of course, what spirituality is trying to teach you, which is connecting to your inside so that you realize everything I need actually is already right there, in here. And that means you don't have to obsess about a lot of things on the outside, but you can. And the reason I wanted to do this particular topic is because the question started welling up inside of me. What is obsession? And the reason I'm not doing this piponga thing is because right now, you know, I rather like to do it a bit like this, to stand in front of the camera and talk about things. And now I have to feel bad because now I'm wasting electricity. But who doesn't? I mean, electricity in itself is already a waste. I mean, imagine how much energy is being wasted just by transporting it. They have to produce way more energy than we can actually use in the end, because most of the stuff that they produce just dissipates. Which just shows how inefficient electricity is as an energy source. And also, you know, if you eat certain types of food, for example, eating a lot of sugar is very inefficient. Because first of all, you have to realize, you know, how did you get to the product? How much energy was used to produce the product? And then how much energy do you get out of it? Because the thing is with sugar, while it does give you a lot of energy short term, it also has a huge cost, and that is it makes you tired, right? Because if you give yourself this really fast and easy accessible energy, that means it doesn't last as long. That means you have a lot of energy available right now, and it boosts you, and an hour later you're so tired you have to do that again, because now your whole body is depending on this constant rush, because if you don't have that, you feel like you're in a low. Whereas what I've realized is when I experienced drinking less coffee and eating less sugar, that I felt like something was wrong, because I didn't feel like, whoa! Yeah, this is the kind of state, you know, when people, they keep drinking these energy drinks, they get so used to the feeling of being riled up because it makes them feel powerful. But that also keeps them trapped and dependent, because you cannot run around like a chimpanzee on steroids all day. I mean, have you seen chimpanzees? Or have you seen elephants? They're quite relaxed most of the time. They only start to tense up if there's actually a challenge to overcome or an obstacle, right? I mean, you only use your strength if something's blocking your way, also emotionally. And so if you always try to be strong by feeling strong through the ingestion of sugar, it actually makes you weak, because you're completely dependent. Because if you go on a hike now and you don't bring something with sugar, after 2 hours you're gonna realize how weak you are, like mentally weak. You're gonna realize that. And so if I go on a hike, I take no phone, I take no food, I just take water, sometimes not even that, just to see what's gonna happen. Of course, you're always self-responsible, right? We as YouTube content creators have to say that, because there's a whole bunch of idiots out there who have no patience and who just think, oh yeah, that guy says he goes on hikes without food and he goes on hikes without water. Yeah, but I also have practiced that a lot, right? So if you just think I'm just gonna do that, well, you know, you might get yourself killed. And then I can say, well, too bad, you know, self-responsibility. And then people come and try to make me responsible, but I say, well, you know, I tried to warn them, but he wouldn't listen to the whole story. Right? Some people, they just want this quick kind of knowledge. And so they read a book. And then they've read the book, or they just go and they read the first 5 sentences of the book. And then they think, oh, I've had enough. Well, maybe, but are you going to make your own experiences instead? Well, that's where most people also don't want to do that, because now they've read something that sounds important, so they can just go and repeat that. And this is this kind of, you know, I give up kind of mentality. You know, that's the same as masturbation and, you know, watching porn. You kind of give up on yourself. So instead of working to feel good, you just run to some virtual stuff. Like me now, right? You can watch my content and that's gonna maybe sometimes put a smile on your face, but do you want to do this your whole life? Listen to my stuff and get off on that? I don't think so. You know, I think you rather want to be a self-realized being or something, right? You want to know how to get to this place yourself. I have to check some. Oh yeah. That still looks alright. Was a little concerned it was getting too dark. So yeah, the reason why I started this thing, talking about obsession, is, first of all, what brought it to my mind was, what was his name? Oh yeah, NF. And he, you probably know him, is a rapper, and he raps a lot about himself. I like that. About how he feels and, you know, how he thinks and what he used to get out of this. And he said that he was diagnosed with OCD. And that means obsessive compulsive disorder. I just had to look that up. And how he explained it is that he obsessively thinks about things that he thinks are very profound. Now, as I understand the word profound, it means very important. So you obsess about something that for some reason keeps you trapped, right? It keeps you hooked and you keep obsessing about it. And now the question that arose, what is obsession, ultimately also asks the question, is obsession something bad? Or is it good? Or can it be both? Because you can obsess about another person, for instance, and that can go pretty bad. I mean, that's what stalkers do, right? They obsess about another person and then they go so far as to try to have that person for themselves. But now let's imagine you are going to obsess about being happy. Is that something bad? I want to be happy, so I obsess about being happy. The only reason why I stand here today and why I have created all of this content was my obsession with balance. I wanted to be obsessed. You know, I was obsessed with figuring out how to lead a better life. That was my obsession. And so if I would have gone to a doctor, to some kind of, I don't know, psychiatrist, I was at the point where I could have done that. You know, that was like one of my lowest points. And I could have gone to a doctor, psychiatrist of some sort, and I could have talked with him. And then I could have said, yeah, Mr. Doctor, you know, I really have this problem. You know, I'm super obsessed about my emotions, right? I just want to figure out what I feel all the time. I'm super obsessed about my diet also, right? I have the feeling something is wrong with my diet, I'm really obsessing about diet. And then the doctor says, because he's now in the position, well, it depends, right? You could have a doctor that says, well, is that a bad thing? You're trying to understand how to better eat. In this kind of society, that's a sensible thought to have. So if you figure that one out, let everyone else know what you discovered. And maybe some other people can learn from you. But first, make your own experiences and really get to the bottom of this. Do your own research and then start talking about it. But you could also come to a doctor, and the doctor then wants to be in charge, and he wants to be the doctor and you're supposed to be the patient. So he wants to keep it that way. So he would say, yeah, that's really bad. Let's schedule a session. It's $500. And then you can really talk about this at length. And then you would sit down and, the guy would sit there with a notepad and you would talk about why you're so obsessed, and he would shake his head and say, yeah, it's very, what can we do about this? This sounds very, very like OCD to me. Oh my God, OCD, what can we do about this? Well, yeah, I'm gonna prescribe you some medication, that's gonna calm you down a little. All your potential down the drain. This is how making money works. Instead, somebody could come to you and say, oh, why are you so worried about? You're obsessing about diet, that's a good thing. Because the reason why I learned how to do art in the way that I do art is because I obsessed about it. I really obsessed about making art, and I went to great length. Sometimes I neglected a lot of my needs because I focused. Obsession to me is also, it's a state of focus. The only thing where you have to pay attention is, are you just on the verge of destroying yourself? Because you can really, this can go very bad. So you always have to have this kind of observer that while you're in the middle of some kind of obsession, some people call this manic depressive. If you would have met me, right, you could say that I have this. Because I have phases where I'm a bit like this, and I have phases where I'm like, rah. And some people, they don't know how to deal with it. And because they're mentally weak or emotionally vulnerable, other people talk them into this, that they say you have a problem, you have to go to the doctor, because they're afraid of them. Well, a lot of people are afraid of me. Children start crying when I go all out on them. What is all out? There's a child in the family, and when I do this, the child starts crying. It's like, oh, what is he doing? I'm doing nothing. I'm just standing there doing this. And children start crying. I could do this in a group with adults. And these adults would stand there and think that, is this guy for real? Am I supposed to... Should we call the police now? That guy's a lunatic. No, I'm expressing my desire to move. And the reason why I got to this place where I can do this, I could do this in front of a lot of people. It's not my goal to do that. I want to get people to do it themselves, right? At home or wherever they want to just express whatever they want to express. And you can express yourself in movements. And you can also express yourself in other ways, but if you never obsess about anything, you see people that move really well, you could say that's an obsession. Because at some point they started to get obsessed with movement. That's just focus, right? I want to learn how to move my body, right? I want to learn why we in this society think that obsession is something bad. Because we're afraid of it. Because some people obsess in a kind of very destructive direction, right? Because you can be very obsessed and then you neglect all your needs. All your needs. You can be obsessed with feeling depressed. That can be an obsession, that you constantly create your life in a way that keeps you depressed. My goal is, right, I don't want to, I never run away from the depression, I think. But, my obsession is more with feeling at peace, right? Feeling at peace. If I look in the mirror and I think I'm ugly, then I have something to work with. And then I'm obsessing with how I feel. You can say that, right? It's like an obsession. I spend days trying to figure out what is going on. What are my emotions, and then I have to sort things out. Wait, is this making me feel this way? No. And then I look for all the things that scare me in the moment. And sometimes it takes a whole week and then suddenly like, wow, that was this feeling? I couldn't place it because there are so many emotions. I have to feel myself through them. And I only can do this because I'm kind of obsessive about it. If I was for years, I was obsessing about pornography. First, I was obsessing in one direction, by obsessing with it, using it. But I also started to use that obsession to understand it. And for years I would watch porn. I did that for quite a while. And I would look at it and understand it, what's going on. What is their expression really saying? Do they really enjoy this? What is it about porn? Why are people watching it? I was constantly obsessed with these kind of questions. And if I would have gone to somebody and talked about it, they would have said, dude, why don't you just watch it? Because it's sick, man. And I know that, but it still took me a very, very large amount of time and insight and observation to understand it until my obsession with porn was satisfied. And I got to the point where I said, wow, I can finally let go of that. Because sometimes an obsession is the wish to let go of something. So to me, what an obsession is, you're trying to get as close to the problem as you can without killing yourself, right? So I got as close to my depression as I could handle. And that was the moment where I was laying in my room and the song came, Another One Bites the Dust, and was playing, and I thought, hell no. And that's as close to my lowest point that I have been. That was, in my life, that was the lowest I allowed myself to get. And when I opened up and I said, I spoke to my parents, I said, I have suicidal thoughts. And I realized they couldn't really help me. And then I realized, I have to help myself. And that was for me okay, nobody can help me with this. Nobody can help me because only I can help myself. That's what I knew because I believed in myself. I knew I can do this. And then I started obsessing about it, right? I started giving it my best shot. Because I had nothing else to lose. I had nothing to lose. I was at the end. And then I started to start from scratch. For whatever reason. And that's what basically jump-started this whole crazy frenzy of simply sharing everything that I found while doing what I was doing. And I found a lot of stuff. And I simply needed an outlet. I needed an outlet. I had to, right? I felt like I had to know that this was all for something. Because if I would have just done that without creating content and putting it online, it would have felt incredibly meaningless. But sharing this kind of stuff with the public gave meaning to me. And that's when I realized that this is what I want to do. You know, I want to help people to work with their own depression and to realize, in that sense, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, what you're feeling is absolutely understandable, because we live in a terrible world where everybody is completely selfish. We live in a terrible world where nobody is allowed to express their feelings or to even hint on having feelings without being judged for that. Like, we live in a world where everybody is literally mortally afraid of having emotions, let alone showing them or showing your weakness. And so I realized, well, I'm just going to be really weak for a while. And I was really weak. I was really, really weak. But at the bottom of this trough, I found a lot of strength and the will to live. And then I said, okay, just do that instead. Just go for it. And so I pushed through all the emotions that were weighing me down, and I turned them into something else through my creative methods. And so, right, what some people call OCD, other people say, it's just focus, mate. I mean, it depends on what you focus on. And what does that mean, compulsive? It's being spontaneous. I mean, we call these things, there is in Chinese philosophy, they say never name a disease, never give a name to it, because that distracts you from what is actually causing it or happening there. Right? If you call it OCD, then you think you have a problem. But the problem is that you gave a name to what you have, because what you have, if you turn that around, you may think you are cursed. But sometimes you think you have a curse, you turn it around, it's a gift. Right? I can say, I mean, I have made hundreds of images, hundreds of them, and there's no end to it, hundreds. I could say it's a curse, and for a long time I actually saw it like this. I saw it as a curse because it is really heavy work. I mean, to look at this kind of twisted world, to see all this suffering, to see all the hate. You know, I see these things. A lot of people, they don't see it. They don't want to see it, so they shut themselves out until they feel nothing anymore. Until all they have left is going to funerals and crying. You know, that's their moment where they can allow themselves to suffer a little. And I just said, I'm just going to suffer now. You know, I'm going to suffer and suffer and suffer. And I suffered. I felt so terrible. And to me, suffering then became a way out of suffering. And that's the crazy part, because, I mean, if you've done this a long time, I was trying to run away from suffering all these years. You know, that's what pornography is about. You try to run away from your suffering. But then you can never overcome it. Because every time it gets a little bit hard, you know, you just try to get away from it. And so what I realized is there's surely transitions. You know, if I realized I was really obsessed with something, because sometimes, I mean, this is how my room is now. It's absolutely clean. And this is as clean as I like it to be also. But sometimes I was in these phases, and my whole room, I mean, it's hidden in my content. My whole room was a complete mess. You literally, I would wake up, and I would get up, and I would try to walk to the door, and this was like an obstacle run. I had to walk, you know, like this. And then I was always searching for things, but what I realized, because I was working on my emotions, And because I was going through some kind of stages, I had no time to clean. Because I was obsessed with getting through this phase. You know, I wanted to get it over with. You know, I was sick of feeling how I felt, and so I had to turn it all upside down. And that's when I sometimes got to the stage. Whoa, what's this? I sometimes got to the stage where I realized, okay, slowly but surely, sometimes it was a couple of weeks, maybe even 2 months, without cleaning. I had a whole pile of laundry in the corner, you know, everything was lying everywhere. There were books open, there was like crocheting needles, wool, everything was just lying around. Yeah, I have this wooden thing that I use as some kind of ashtray. It was just all full. It was all dirty. Everything was full with dust. Everything. But I realized at the moment it's all right. Because for some time I wanted to live in my inner mess. I wanted to be in it. I wanted to really look at it. But I also wanted to feel comfortable in it. And that's what Zen is about. It's about feeling comfortable in any situation. And I can tell you, this place did not smell good. But to me it did. You know, I got used to it. I said, yeah, it's actually all right. I mean, it looks very dirty. And nobody except for me could have lived in this. But to me it was, hey, you know, I can actually, this is working. Until someday I woke up and I found the strength and also prepared myself. I waited for my time. I was biding my time in this mess. And every day I would wake up, I would think about cleaning, and it was like, nah, not today. And then I woke up one day, and actually I got this premonition the day before, and it said, tomorrow it's gonna be good weather, so tomorrow you will clean. And I said, all right. And we just had a whole, you know, a long period of time where there was a lot of rain and cloud cover. And I woke up, I don't know if it was a Friday, and I woke up and the sun was shining. And I thought, I mean, this is literally insane, because I never checked the weather forecast. But it said, tomorrow you're gonna wake up. I just knew it, tomorrow's gonna be good weather. And I woke up and it was good weather. And then I cleaned, but I also learned to make transitions with cleaning. I only cleaned a certain part. I didn't clean everything. You know, I made sure that I did some things, and then I pushed other things a bit more to the distance. So, you know, because it was dry, I brought out my carpet and this mattress that I sleep on, put it on the railing, I dusted it off, and there was a lot of dust on it, and I wiped the ground. But a lot of the other things I did later, right? Like this shelf, I cleaned that a bit later, and then, but it's like transitions. And then I had to do the laundry, but I did that like each day, one step. And what I realized, because I was obsessing a lot about figuring out what works for me specifically, right? I was obsessing about how energy flows within me and what helps me to let it flow a bit better. So I was obsessing about diet. I was obsessing about a lot of things. And because I did that, I gathered a lot of information. And this information helped me to figure out what works for me. And yeah, well, one thing, if you're obsessive about things, then ask yourself, why are you so obsessed about it? And when you try talking to people about it, they will say, well, what's your problem? You know, just let it go. It's not that important. Well, but if it's important to you, then ask yourself why. And if it's something that you feel like you really have to go into, then figure it out, right? I mean, there's people maybe you are really obsessed with, and I'm just going to say something, orgies. I have to say, I have thought a great deal about orgies. if I would like to participate in one, if that would be the kind of thing to do. So what I realized is, and the same thing with threesomes, because I had sometimes situations where I could have done this, and of course I could have also planned to do it, right? I could have sought out an experience like this. But I'm kind of obsessive about it, so if I think about if that is something for me, it's sometimes enough. I just have to imagine it. And then I use all the experiences I have had to date to help me figure out whether or not threesomes or orgies would be something for me. And what I've realized is that I like exclusive relationships. If I want to be with a woman, right, then I want to know that this woman only wants me. And I only want this woman. I don't want to focus on 10 kinds of people. I don't want another guy touching the woman that I want to be with. Because, I mean, I want to be with her, so why would I want to see other men touching her? And that is something that was very important to me when I was looking also for a partner. And I mean, that's all there is to it, basically. And I can say, I'm glad I found one. And then you realize, well, sometimes you figure out what you want because you were obsessed about finding love. And then you find love, and then you realize, oh my God, this is a real challenge. Like, I have to really change now. I have to really turn myself inside out to also be able to live that, what I thought was so nice. And so, yeah, you can obsess about a lot of things, and sometimes it's better to obsess a bit from a distance. Because especially obsessions that involve other people, which I would call them threesomes or orgies, are an attempt to run away from yourself. Because often why people want a threesome, and now you have to ask yourself, do you want, as a man, do you want one with 2 women or with 2 men? And 1 woman, or an orgy, right? How do you even imagine that? Because sometimes what I see a lot, there's some kind, because I have watched a lot of porn, I can talk about it. Sometimes you see these people, and there's this weird kind of group of people that I find really disgusting. It's just like manifested trauma. And they call themselves Erstis. It's like a German group. And they want to do like more open kind of porn. It's so disgusting when you look at it. They are all so energetically completely dirty. Dirty, dirty, dirty. But if you have no eye for that, you won't see it. You think, oh, nice, super sexy. But when I see that, I think, my God, these people are so dirty. And I know how dirty looks like. I've lived it. I know how it looks like. I know how it feels like. And I can see that even through a screen. And I can see if people are honest about what they're feeling. And now I've seen, because they do this a lot, oh yeah, this girl had a fantasy about, 2 guys that would suddenly turn up and they would take her and then they would have this amazing sex together. And then you see they're shooting this with 2 guys that come and do this. She can't open up to it at all. And now you have to ask yourself why she had that fantasy in the first place. She was so obsessing about it because it was easier to imagine, whenever she felt good, that suddenly 2 guys come and give her a really good time, than to accept that, why she wanted that was because she feels unloved. So then she thinks, oh, better than 1 guy loving me would be 2 guys. And then I can really forget how I feel. So sometimes we get into these obsessions that bring us actually further away from ourselves. And now she has to deal with the fact that she had this fantasy all the time. And having had fulfilled that fantasy, revealed to her that wasn't it either. But the price was that she had now two guys entering her, which is confusing her even more. Because sexuality is merging you with another person. And the more people you do that with, the less you will realize how you actually feel. And so this is also part of the emotional cleansing. You have to get rid of all these people that you allow to enter yourself. Every time you kiss a person, every time you hug a person, all this confuses you because you pick up on their energy and you think that's you. Sometimes you go around, you shake somebody's hands, or you go and hug 20 people, and suddenly you have all their emotions inside of you. Well, good luck dealing with that. Because if you don't know how to distance yourself from the way you feel, then you will always get sucked into all these kinds of emotions. And some of these emotions that I'm dealing with on a daily basis aren't even mine. And I know that because I know how I feel like. And so I can distinguish between how do I feel like and how do other people feel like. But the truth is, I'm the one that has to go through this at the moment. So I'm the one that is quite empty. I'm quite empty. I'm quite empty, I mean that. And that means if I post stuff on the internet, people connect with me, or I start chatting with them, this already connects a heart-to-heart connection. This establishes a heart-to-heart connection. And then I'm dealing with emotions from other people. And by now, I can handle it, but it's still a challenge. And the reason why I can talk like this, and sometimes I think it's a bit too much, because who really has to hear this? But it's because I obsessed about knowing how I feel, how do I feel, so that when people drag me into their thing, I can just stay here. And this is why having my own space, where I spend a lot of time alone, is to me very important. So I can hold this space and be myself, and that is to me sort of an obsession, because here I feel good. Of course I can carry that space wherever I go, but here I have a lot of things that remind me on all the stuff that I struggle through. So of course also letting that go at one stage and moving on is quite the challenge. Anyway, this was generally what I wanted to say about obsession. Sometimes we obsess about things that bring us further away from ourselves, and sometimes we obsess about things that actually get us closer to ourselves. But there's always this fine balance, right? Because you can obsess about getting closer to yourself, but also there are certain boundaries, right? Sometimes I really want to get to the root of a problem, and then I try to do all these kind of things, and then I realize at one point, actually you're done already. Because then you're obsessing about the problem because you're afraid to let it go. So that's also the part, right? You can obsess about watching porn, but at one point you have to accept that, you've obsessed about this all along, but what you actually were doing was holding on to it. So at one stage I had already understood why I watch porn and why we watch porn. It was clear. We're all depressed, right? We're all frustrated. That's just showing it. And I was telling myself, yeah, I'm still learning, I'm still learning. And at one point I said, just let it go, man. Just let it fly. You've learned all that you could from it, right? Now let it go. And that's the really hard part. Because if porn has been part of your life for such a long time, or anything, can be whatever you're trying to let go of, became at one point a part of yourself because you started identifying with yourself. So you have to make enough experiences to learn to see yourself from a different perspective, And then you can step away from wow, and then you look at yourself, how you used to be, and you think, wow, this is how I used to be. And once you've seen that, and that's what I mean, sometimes I had to obsess about these things. Why? Because I first had to see myself truly, right? You know, so as I was obsessively watching porn, I also was observing myself doing it. Anyway, that's all I have to say. You know, I don't want to do these too long anymore. I think it's enough.